if you woke up tomorrow morning and discovered you were the only person on the planet who remembered the Beatles? John, Paul, George, and Ringo have all been forgotten. Marmalade skies? Nonsense. You scribble down all the lyrics you recall, pass them off as your own, and land a major record contract. Everyone regards you as a rock god. You're well aware that you're a phony. This is the idea of Danny Boyle's new film, Yesterday, a type of reverse biopic in which the subjects are erased from history, leaving a yellow submarine-sized hole. So in today's video, let's explore the idea of how New York would be different if the Beatles didn't exist. But before we begin, please like our video and subscribe to our channel. The Beatles are often regarded as the most influential music band of all time. Little Steven told You Discover Music that witnessing them on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964 was the most crucial moment of my life. This is the impact the Beatles had on individuals, so think how the lives of the ones who followed them so much would have been different. Before this idea was pitched and the movie began to film, there was a lot that happened before, so let's see how it all went down. Boyle selected British actor Himesh Patel to play Jack Malik, a poor singer-songwriter who climbs from anonymity to Malik mania. His debut film is Yesterday. Patel, 28, stepped out of a rented automobile on a rainy West Village street hours before its premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival. Tourists can choose from a variety of New York Beatles excursions, but Patel chose his own personalized What If the Beatles Never Existed tour. 105 Bank Street, a damaged white stucco townhouse where an unknown couple named John and Yoko lived between 1971 and 1973, stood before him. I did some research on this building. Patel, rumpled black hair, green raincoat, explained. In the late 1800s, there was a family of 3 brothers residing there. 2 of them attempted to defraud the other's widow and ended up in court. There's this strange backdrop of sibling criminality. He shrugged and hopped back into the car. In 2017, he self-taped his audition for Yesterday while in New York for an off-Broadway play, he recalled. The posting simply stated, Danny Boyle Project, working title, Elements of Music. I had to perform a dramatic monologue and a Coldplay song of my choice. He went with We Never Change. He was summoned to London a few days later. Before he went, he noticed a busker singing I Want to Hold Your Hand on a subway platform. He winked at me as I passed, Patel recalled. That was an odd signal. The car drove him off on Manhattan's Upper West Side at the Dakota, which was famous for its role in Rosemary's Baby. A French tour group walked by, and Patel heard the guide mention Jean and Lennon. Mysterious. He entered Central Park, where people were putting roses on a mosaic, and a musician on a park bench was singing Imagine, a Jack Malik song. Patel was reminded of the opening sequence of Yesterday, in which Jack performs his own songs on the streets of Blackton-on-Sea. One non-cast member went to Patel's music instructor and commented, Quite good, isn't he? The French visitors had arrived. It was time to leave. Patel was up in a small town in Cambridgeshire, where his parents, Indian Hindus, who had immigrated from Africa, owned a newspaper shop. For miles and miles, we were the sole South Asian family, Patel explained. He grew up listening to Bollywood, but when he tried to get his peers interested in Indian music, they dismissed him. At the time, I wasn't really listened to, he stated. However, it turns out that Indian music was such a foundation for what we call pop because the Beatles were doing it. He eventually became interested in indie rock, such as The Killers and the Arctic Monkeys. He was cast as Tamwar Masood, the nerdy son of a Pakistani family in the British serial opera EastEnders, when he was 16 and stayed for 8 years. On February 9, 1964, the automobile arrived at the Ed Sullivan Theater, where nothing really scream-worthy occurred. Patel had brought his father to witness a recording of The Late Show 2 years before. Weirdly, me, Danny, and Richard Curtis are going to Stephen Colbert's place for dinner tomorrow, Patel gushed. The automobile passed the Warwick Hotel, which did not host a bizarre news conference on August 22, 1966. Reporter, do you believe happiness is truly egg-shaped, or is this merely a tale from the egg marketing magazine? Hoo, exclaimed Paul. The final visit was Shea Stadium in Flushing, when 50,000 people did not gather on August 15, 1965. What's more difficult than making a band vanish? making a stadium vanish. "They paved heaven," Patel exclaimed, as he approached the parking area where Shea had previously been. Citi Field, the new stadium next door, was hosting the New York Beer Fest. Patel was directed to Lot D, where he discovered a plaque that said, "Location of Shea Stadium home plate, 1964 to 2008. "It's as though I'm in Jack's universe," Patel exclaimed. "What happened to it?" He was reminded of a scene they shot in Liverpool at Strawberry Field, a children's home that didn't inspire any songs. When the crew arrived, everything was in ruins. It felt like an uncanny portrayal of the story. "We annihilated them." It turned out that the building was being renovated. "The vicar at the church told us," Patel explained. "Now consider how the Beatles influenced the music world, both in the West and in the United States, and what we would not have if the Beatles had not existed." The Beatles established fan power. The Beatles not only had a significant impact on popularizing the guitar electric bass drums formula for rock bands, but they also spawned the fan phenomenon Beatlemania. The Beatles opened up a world of possibilities to electrified youthful followers who had the spare cash and free time to follow them as they acquired a huge following in the early 1960s. Timothy Leary, a 1960s counterculture writer, claimed that the Beatles were blessed with a magical capacity to produce a new human species, a newborn race of laughing free men. Sting was one such fan. On the day he turned 13, October 2nd, 1964, the Beatles were filming a TV special called Shindig, having just taken America by storm. "The Beatles were influential in my childhood and schooling," Sting stated. "They hailed from similar backgrounds, industrial areas in England, working class. They wrote their own songs and dominated the globe." That was the pattern for many more British students to follow. Beatlemania extended around the world, even changing perceptions toward Western culture among young people in communist bloc countries during a Cold War age still recovering from the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Beatles pioneered stadium rock. The Beatles' spectacular tours of America paved the way for the British invasion, allowing other bands, such as the Rolling Stones, to become huge in the United States. Little Steven told You Discover about his indelible memory of watching The Ed Sullivan Show on February 9, 1963, along with 73 million other Americans. "It was the most crucial moment of my life, and it left an imprint on my generation." Little Steven, who was 12 at the time, said, "It was the equivalent of a flying saucer landing in your neighborhood park, except more powerful because you'd seen flying saucers arrive in parks and movies. You'd never see anything like the Beatles before." The Beatles' debut on American television in 1963 sparked a rush to see them live. When they returned to America in August 1965, they played at Flushing Meadows Queen's Shea Stadium. There, 55,600 shouting fans greeted the band in a frenzy, setting a record for a popular music concert. The event in New York was the opening stop on an 18-day, 11-city tour. According to Beatles writer Bob Spitz, the 1965 tour was a significant step toward altering the concert business. The Shea Stadium concert was a watershed moment for promoters everywhere. It liberated them from the confines of a gym or a theater, transforming a pop performance into an event. Bands followed their musical instincts. After beginning with covers and 2-minute pop songs, the Beatles modified their sound and popularized the concept of the full-length album in the late 1960s, setting the groundwork for other bands' artistic evolutions. Much of popular music in the half-century since 1967 owes something to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was a one-of-a-kind journey in sound, songwriting, studio technology, and even cover art. Among many other things, the album influenced Pink Floyd's 1973 masterwork, The Dark Side of the Moon. "I learned from John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison that it was okay for us to write about our experiences and express ourselves. More than any other record, it offered me and my generation the freedom to experiment and do anything we wanted," Roger Waters stated. Bands who write their own tunes. Prior to the Beatles, there was the Tin Pan Alley style of song selection, in which an act would record a song written by professional songwriters. Cliff Richard did it, and Tom Jones kept doing it. George Martin encouraged the Beatles to record a song called How Do You Do It for their second single. Instead, they delivered the far superior, self-penned Please Please Me. With Lennon and McCartney on board, the Beatles were unique in that they could abandon cover versions after a while. 1964's A Hard Day's Night was the first and only Beatles album to feature only Lennon and McCartney songs. Bands are becoming better with each album. The progression from 1963's Please Please Me LP to Sgt. Pepper 4 years later is astonishing. In such a short period of time, the Beatles had progressed from a beat band with young fans to songwriters and recording artists acknowledged by musicologists all over the world. Even when they deviated, as with the White Album, the Beatles did the reverse of what was expected. They played by their own rules. Pop records with world music. George Harrison first saw Indian instruments during the shooting of the film Help in 1965, and his desire to study the sitar was instrumental in bringing music from other civilizations into the mainstream. The Beatles also introduced electronica, avant-garde soundscapes, classical music, and nearly every other genre into the domain of simple pop songs. So that's it, guys. This is how the Beatles revolutionized the world of music, and a great deal would have been different in New York in regards to music if they hadn't existed. What do you think of the thought of the Beatles not existing in the world? How influential were the Beatles in your life? Tell us in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video around. I'll see you in the next one.